I started my journey with Cisco in the Silicon Valley. And what we were doing was creating the plumbing for the internet. And what was internet? Internet was moving packet grams from point A to point B. Packets were moving from point A to point B. What UPI and what payments is doing is moving money grams from point A to point B. And that is creating an amazing revolution because money actually in some ways has more information than packets themselves. Now if you look at our journey, UPI actually had started about 1.5 years before Google Pay launched. You remember we launched in September of 2017. I was in the room as well. Mr. Arun Jaitley did the first transaction in that room. Uh, Before we launched, in August of 2017, the month before we launched, there were 17 million transactions for the whole month of August of 2017 on UPI. In August of 2023, that is last month, exactly, sort of like 6 years after that, uh, 10.5 billion transactions were made. So it went from 17 million to 10 point. So in first 1.5 years, it had gone to 17 million. And then in the last 6 years, it's now gone from 17 million to 10.5 billion transactions. The simplicity mattered a lot, which I think has been a big part of it. But beyond that, also bringing people into the fold. So our whole mission was, make payments simple, secure, and accessible, and create economic opportunity for all Indians really. And that mission has stayed the same, and I think it's a 20-year mission because we continue on that. So we started with making sure people could come into that fold. Remember, we started with like scratch cards. We were the first ones to create scratch cards, which created a lot of excitement. And then we've enabled other features like this. Globally, we have a wallet solution where in many places cards are very prevalent. Therefore, you will see the product there look like tap and pay, where you add a card to Google Pay and then you can just tap everywhere. Or we have products where you'll do autofill. You get on a Chrome browser and your credit card gets filled automatically, or you add your boarding passes to that into this wallet. So it's a more of a wallet solution. But then there are also other places where we are localizing. For example, in Singapore, you've got the Pay Now rail, and so we work in Singapore with a large number of users who use GPay in Singapore to send money, either P2P, peer-to-peer payments, or peer to merchant. So you'll see that in Singapore a lot where we can make a payment to a QR, but also do a tap and pay. Similarly, in Brazil, you got the Pix rail, where we have a slightly different solution on how we enable Pix. So the whole idea is, and especially fintech, is a very internet in some ways is very homogeneous everywhere, in the sense that same set of protocols. You've got HTTP, you've got like TCP/IP, all the same set of protocols work. Fintech is a very local game where every country has different set of regulations. Banking looks slightly different, payment rails look slightly different, and therefore the solution has to look different. Credit cards look very similar because of some of the networks, and therefore that is one piece you'll see in GPay globally similar. But coming back to India, I don't think anywhere in the world you have this kind of explosion of payments and what we've seen in the last 6 years. So even for us, I think India remains the most exciting place for Google Pay. It's continuing to do so. So when I talk about 10.5 billion transactions in August, it's not at a slow pace that it has gotten here. It's grown year over year 60-65%. It's actually a 600x growth since we launched. UPI has a 600 times growth since August of 2017. The difference in India is that I think we end up leapfrogging a lot of things. And digital payments is the most recent example of it. But we've like growing up, we didn't have phones in our house, and then everybody has mobile phones. Same way like you know, malls haven't built as much. If you look at it, and e-commerce is happening. Same way payments. So this payments is a perfect example of how we are leapfrogging the developed world in leaps and bounds. This time, maybe this jump is much bigger. But coming to sort of your question on challenges, it's not really different from anybody else. Like GPay, just from a payment perspective in India, not very specific different challenges. I think the challenges together of the ecosystem scaling to this level of intensity of payments that's happening. For example, when an IPL match happens, right? So 7:30 p.m. Let's say there is an IPL match. Between 7 and 7:30 p.m., you'll see a lot of sort of the sports games that people would pay, and they have like a very small amount that'll go up there, and they'll use different methods of payments in there. Suddenly, the intensity goes up, and the systems come under the ecosystem overall. Like I think Google, we've seen this kind of scale, but systems overall will come under load. But that is getting solved now, for example with UPI Lite. So UPI Lite essentially is a mechanism where it doesn't really have to hit bank servers. We also don't need a pin to complete that transaction. So if your users haven't tried UPI Lite, definitely it's something to look at. But that solved that challenge and said, look, that intensity is going up, we solved the challenge. Similarly, as even if you roll back time a few years back, as the transactions are starting to take off, perhaps just before, right before the COVID times, or around that time, it had an exponential rise suddenly, and the ecosystem was coming under load, and transactions were starting to fail. Maybe you've seen some of that. And we've all sort of gotten together. We work with the banks, we work with our partners to make sure that together, end to end, this transaction succeeds. Now, people are listening. I don't know if they know this, but any single transaction on UPI can hit as many as 7 different entities. Everything has to work. So there is a sending app, there is a receiving app, there is a sending PSP, a receiving PSP, payment service provider, which are generally banks. There is a sending bank, a receiver bank, and NPCI. So all of these folks have to work together and make that single transaction successful. Sometimes some of these entities are the same, but sometimes it could be different. So making sure that ecosystem scales together, that is very critical. And I think that has happened with UPI Lite, with reliability fixes that we have done. That's happened. The other challenge that collectively we have, not just actually just the fintech ecosystem, but even more as users, is financial education, and saying, look, what does it mean to have do a UPI transaction, and the fact that I should not share my pin with anyone, or I should not share my phone in a way where they could use the transaction. If I give my phone and a pin, a lot of you could put as much security as you like, but that won't happen. So in more recent times, what we are seeing is a lot of social engineering, where people would try to social engineer your way. Now that is no different from, even if I was carrying cash, somebody could sell me a fake good or something else that has no value and take cash away. But those are the kind of sort of new challenge that we have to solve, especially as we go beyond hundreds of millions, right? As you start going down to more and more cities and towns, and more sort of people. So as the next set of people start using it, how do we educate them for the right way of using it? What can UPI enable, what can't they enable? So financial education. And the last thing I'd say is that the other challenge we together have is, as we start building on top of this, I talked about these packet grams moving from one place to the other, but as we start thinking about enabling credit, some prime people will buy insurance through this channel, buy other things. How should they think about it? What kind of power does it bring? What should they do? Like, when should they take credit, when should they not take credit? What should they do with it? How to not over leverage themselves, how to manage their financial life on top of it, I think will become more and more important for our users, as well as for India as a country, because I think we are getting to a point where more and more people will have disposable income, they'll have aspirations, and being able to manage their money, being able to operate their money digitally especially, will become important. And those are the challenges we have to start continuously meeting. There are two parts to it: privacy and security. I think we are like, the gold standard in how we deal with data, how we look at data, and really, more importantly, how we not look at data and make sure that we keep it safe, both from a security as well as a privacy perspective. We are actually the only company probably in India who is proactively taking a consent from the user. Even, I mean, PDP has just come now or talking about it, but we take proactively consent, saying you have to tell us whether we should use your data or not. Till you tell us that, we will not let you move forward, because I want to know from you how to use them. So from a privacy perspective, we are as forward as it gets worldwide. From a security perspective, I think because this is coming back to what I talked the first time. Because we run global products, we know how to do this. Our data centers, how these data is treated, is as secure as anybody will have. It's much much more secure, and we take that very seriously because we have a bunch of reviews, processes, and technology to bring it together to make sure your data will always be absolutely secure and private.